Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in for this webinar. My name is Vipul and I lead co-marketing for VWO. I'll be your moderator for today. For those who are hearing about VWO for the first time, VWO is the world's most trusted and easiest to use A/B testing and conversion rate optimization platform. I'm excited about today's webinar because we'll be discussing a topic that many businesses seem to understand but fail to execute. Presenting the webinar today is Rahul Jain, who is the Senior Product Manager for VWO. Hello, Rahul.
Hello, Vipul. Thanks for the introduction.
Yep. And joining Rahul for this presentation is Nilesh Patel. He's the founder and CEO of LeadSquared, a sales CRM and marketing automation platform. Now, before I let the respective speakers introduce themselves and start their presentation, I request everyone to ask any questions they might have during the course of this presentation to ask their questions in their GoToWebinar question panel. With that, Rahul, let's begin.
So thanks again, Vipul, for the introduction and welcome everyone. I am excited to see you all here today, and I would love to chat more about your optimization efforts post my session. So let me just give you a quick introduction to VWO before we begin. So VWO is a conversion optimization and A/B testing platform that really helps you optimize your website so that you can get maximum ROI from all the optimization efforts that you put into the website. So, so before I jump into sort of a conversion optimization process, I would just like to quickly give you a brief about what it is and why is it important to follow a structured process. So a typical conversion optimization process starts with understanding what the user is doing on the website and what are the problem areas of the website. So in the first research phase, we try to find out what is wrong by defining business goals and funnels, and why is it wrong by looking at the visitor journey. Once we have insights, we use this data in the hypothesis phase. So in this phase, we actually define the problems and the solutions based on our research. In the next phase, once we have a backlog of ideas, we prioritize them based on different criteria such as confidence, importance, and ease of implementation. So once we have a prioritized list of ideas, we test them against existing version of the website. And finally, once we have learnings from the test, we deploy winning hypothesis and gather learnings for subsequent tests. So for my part of the presentation, I would like to focus on ways in which you can really understand what the customer is doing on the website and what are the pain points of the customers. So one question that we all the time get is that why is the research important? Why do we have to do research? There are tons of optimization ideas available on the internet today. So why research? Why should you invest your resources and time into understanding the customer when there are many optimization ideas and best practices available on the internet? So what I'll do is I'll actually talk about certain sort of data points which will really help you understand why it is very, very important to understand what the customer is doing on the website. So for example, let's say you have 1 million monthly traffic, and let's take a common sort of industry bounce rate of 30%. Then you have 700,000 qualified visitors. And as per research, 30 to 70% of the people are in the market to buy. So let's assume that 50% of the people in the market are to buy. So you have 350,000 potential customers. And let's say you have a 2% conversion rate and you have 7,000 completed orders. So now you're left with 343,000 visitors, which becomes your opportunity. And most of us put a lot of efforts into SEO, trying to get maximum traffic on the website, but we don't focus on all the traffic that we already have on the website. And like I mentioned, the 343,000 opportunity is huge. And it becomes very important to understand why these 343,000 visitors are not converting. So like I mentioned, that best practices might not work for you, and I'll talk about certain cases why this is true. So let's talk about this example. So all of us have heard that adding a privacy policy increases trust and improves conversion rate. So in this example, where we actually tried adding this 100% privacy, we will never spam you uh, in the variation. But once we ran this test, we saw that this variation got 18% less signups. You must be wondering that why did this happen? It should actually increase trust and it should actually improve conversions. But that's not true. Let's take an example. For instance, you want to shop at a store, and you go there and you see there is a lot of security. Would you prefer shopping there, or would you prefer to shop at a place which has no distractions? So for example, you go to sign up for a website, and then you see that there is this privacy concern. You might not be thinking about privacy at the first place, but by adding this particular message, you got conscious, you got scared, because it could go otherwise for you as well. This is what happened in the test which I showed before. The user tried to add this privacy section on the sign up page, but it went other ways round and it decreased the conversion rate. So let's take another example. So this is also one very common sort of best practices available, which says that all your important CTAs should be above the fold. So again, there was this experiment which was run where, a CTA was actually put below the fold. And it was very surprising that, once the CTA was put below the fold, it got 300% more conversion. Now again, you would think that why did this happen? Why were the treatment A getting more conversions? So there is again a philosophy behind this. So there are certain customers who would not scroll below the fold, but there are certain customers who would actually look at the entire sort of page before they make a buying decision. This is what happened in this case as well. Most of the visitors were actually scrolling below the fold. So once they have seen the entire page, that is when they make the decision. And this is what happened in this case. So they looked at the entire website, and once they reached the bottom, that is when they were convinced that they should sign up. So this is again one of the case studies which shows that best practices might not be right for you. Again, this is a very interesting example. So all of us know that it's very important to create a fear of missing out, and we have seen that work for a lot of websites and becomes a sort of best practices. So let's take this example again. So this is wineexpress.com, which sells wines, and what they did was they ran an experiment wherein in one variation they shows that they created sort of scarcity, where they said that you order in the next few hours to get shipping at a lower cost. And in the variation, what they did was they actually removed this, and surprisingly they got more conversions in the place where this was not shown. And now again, most of you would think that hey, scarcity always wins, and you always get more conversions if you create that fear of missing out. But again, let's look at the kind of users that Wine Express gets. So while doing the analysis, they realized that Wine Express gets a lot of sophisticated wine buyers, and once they see such marketing tactics, they get turned off and they bounce off from the page. So again, in this example, it becomes very important to understand what your visitors are, who your visitors are, and what do they really want. Like in this example, the visitor got pissed off because they were sophisticated wine buyers, and they did not like this they did not like this marketing tactic. So I hope now you're convinced that best practice might not work for you. So now the question remains that, hey, all that is okay, best practice won't work for me, and I am still left with so many visitors that I want to do research on. What is the right process to do it? So we get a lot of questions from our customers where they ask us that, hey, I have so many customers, I have so many heat maps, I have so many recordings, I have so many qualitative analysis tools. How do I look at it? What should be the starting point and what should be the process behind doing research? So one thing that we recommend to all sort of our customers is that aimless research is really bad for you. While you look at visitor recordings or heat maps, they might excite you in the beginning, but slowly and surely you'll get bored of it or you might get tired of looking at it. But there is a structured process to it. So let us divide research into two parts. So research mainly is about quantitative research and qualitative research. So the first starting step of doing research is to set up business goals. So for example, for an e-commerce customer, a business goal could be adding a product to the cart or checkout. Similarly, for let's say a SaaS business, it could be lead generation. So first step is to know your business goals. Know what's the most important goal for you. So by setting up a goal, you first thing that you do is establish a baseline. So when I say establish a baseline, what I mean is that you try to understand what are your current conversion rates. And second step is to observe a trend. So for instance, you're running a marketing campaign and you are expecting that your conversion rate should go up, and it is not going up, it is rather going down. So you should really observe the trends of your conversion rate. So once you have done that, the second step is to establish your business funnels. So for every goal, every macro goal that you set up, there has to be certain steps that a user has to take in order to reach that particular goal. So it is very important to understand that in which stage of your funnel the visitors are dropping off. So after you have done both of these processes, you know what is the problem. So for instance, I know that from one step to the other, I'm getting 40% drop off. What does that mean? I know that the problem is there. I know where the problem is happening. I know the number, but I don't know why is it happening. So there comes the second step of research, which is the qualitative analysis. So in the qualitative analysis, you can use multiple tools such as heat maps, visitor recordings, user testing, surveys to really understand why are visitors dropping off? Why is the conversion not happening? So it's really important to visualize the customer journey and understand the exact reason why a conversion is not happening. So essentially, when you reach this stage, you would specifically look at the data of visitors who are leaking from the funnel or who are not converting for your particular goal. So this ways you have really deep dive into your bigger set, and you now look at visitors who are not converting. And then what you can do is you can even go further and slice and dice and look at specific segments that are most important to you. So by following this sort of process, you essentially look at the right data of the right user at the right time. And then once you have data backed ideas, then you can experiment, and that will actually give you better ROI. So let's look at a couple of case studies where some of our customers actually tried all of this structured conversion optimization process, and they actually did not go by their own sort of assumptions or best practices, and they actually got positive ROI. So let's take a first example. So this is an example where we ourselves tried using conversion rate optimization process on our own free trial form. So what we did was, usually when you are looking at a form, you mostly focus on the submission rates. So for instance, you know that 30% of your customers are actually filling up a form, but is that information enough? So that for us, that information was not enough. So what we did was we looked at each and every field. We tried to understand how each and every field is performing. Where are visitors hesitating? What are the fields that are working for us? What are the fields that are not working for us? And we realized that there are certain fields which might not be important. Or for instance, people are not willing to give you that information. We cannot just assume that people are not, let's say, willing to give us phone number, or people are not willing to give us their names. we have to look at actual data, and we have to understand, where you're getting maximum ignore rate, where people are actually hesitating. So for this purpose, we use form analysis and visitor recordings in combination. We looked at data of visitors who were actually, not filling up the form, or, visitors who were actually ignoring a certain field. And we also noticed there were certain fields where we were getting maximum drop off. So all this information really helped us optimize the form. We looked at a lot of data and we tried to understand what fields are conversion boosters for us and what fields are conversion killers for us. And what we did was, after doing all of the analysis, we actually removed most of the fields from our form. We thought, we did a deep analysis and we tried to understand, and we thought we just need a work email ID. All other informations might not be helping us get more leads from our customers or prospects. And you would be surprised that we got almost 40% increase in our conversion rate just by reducing the number of fields in the form. And if I had gone by the best practices, I would simply just remove the fields from the form randomly based on my own assumptions. But what we did was we looked at actual customer data to try to understand that, which fields are working for us and which fields are not. So let's take another example. So Corgi is a insurance company which sells home loans, and their business goal was to increase the transactions. So now their USP was that, they provided transparent pricing, and they had no hidden pricing, or everything was visible on the website easily. So they wanted to make this information even more easily available to their customers. So they could have easily, highlighted all the trust factors right at the top of the page, but they went by a proper conversion optimization process. So essentially what they did was, they looked at a lot of data. They looked at heat map data. They ran surveys to try to understand what are the pain points of their customers. So after doing a lot of research, they come up with the following insights. So after doing research, they figured out that people were thinking that their site is not transparent enough. Their value proposition is not coming out properly. So they looked at scroll map. So scroll map actually helps you understand how deep your visitors are looking at on your page. What is your average fold? Are they even looking below the fold or not? And they realized that only 1/3 of their mobile users were scrolling down to see their value proposition. So at that time, they had their value proposition at the bottom of the page. They also ran a survey where they asked their users that did they look elsewhere before visiting the site, and more than 70% of the respondents had looked elsewhere. Similarly, they also asked their users what they care most about. So 18% of the users said fast service, while another 20% says reliability. So essentially, if you are not able to get certain answers from your qualitative analysis, it's really important to ask the users directly by running surveys. This is what exactly that they did. Now, when they ran an experiment on this, they highlighted all the changes that their customers suggested. As you can see in the variation, they've mentioned absolutely no hidden charges, 88% of the call out fixed on first visit, and 24/7 emergency callouts. They did not do this based on their own assumption. They asked their users, which is why they were confident that this change would work. And indeed, all of this got them more than 30% increase in their transaction. So I hope you understood that why is it important to do customer research, and why is it important to come up with data-driven ideas to optimize your website. So now in the next part of the webinar, Nilesh will talk about how you can actually increase these leads. So in the example of Corgi, they actually have transactions wherein people request a quote from them or people directly call them. So now you have data sitting in your CRM system. Now Nilesh will talk about how you can get maximum conversions of the data that is sitting in your CRM system. So over to you, Nilesh.
Hey, Rahul, thank you so much. It was awesome to hear some of these insights, and I'm just thinking maybe we are losing some of the opportunities on our own website. But I'll save that for later, and I will sort of start into my side of the presentation quickly. So so LeadSquared system is primarily used by businesses to increase their conversions around leads which are generated from website or other offline channels, and to uplift and drive the conversions of that. And so what we found in our experience is that how to sort of drive the conversion. So all the cool things which Rahul talked about gives you an understanding of the customer's behavior on your website in particular. But what you can also gather further is the other signals, I would call, or sales signals, which you can find from your customer's behavior beyond the website. So some part of the website obviously is the visits and the revisits, and in some businesses you may have portals people visit to sort of resubmit some information over the course of their interaction with your business. And you obviously would be having some of the other messaging products being used to sending information over to the customers, so tracking what's going on with that. Cases where people are filling the forms again, asking for information again. This happens in some cases, and today this piece is also being taken up by some of the chatbots out there, who are basically, when you go there again, they may ask for some information and generate a signal out of that. Or if you have a mobile application, which is basically the customer front end, how people are using and utilizing that. Or if you're sort of let's say an education product company, have some sort of material available as a video product, and sort of how much of a video somebody has watched as a free product which you offer. And based on that, you can gather some information in terms of the interest level of the consumer or the customer, and respond to that appropriately. So the SMS and the text is again extension of that, the messaging aspect of the sales signal. So the idea really is to understand what signals are available to us out there from the customer side, and make a notice of that, and basis of what we hear, listen, understand, create some actionable outcome of that for our business, right? So assuming that we have some information available with us from these signals, what can we do, or what factors will help us navigate the question whether we should contact them on the phone or on email or any other mechanism which is available to us. So what most of our customers do, and what I've heard is beneficial and useful and drives sales for the customer, is the ability to score the customer, the lead, in terms of the signals which are being generated. And so you give, most people would be familiar with the idea of lead scoring, but you can score the lead in a variety of ways. And basis of context, you can further assign a score. So somebody making a phone call to you may not mean much sometimes, and could be more valuable other times, right? So that could drive the score in a different direction. And so that is one parameter you can consider. Then the ability to understand the engagement level, and this again goes back to the factors which Rahul mentioned, and some of that which you can gather from the communication which goes on with the consumer or the customer. And fundamentally, what I would also ascribe a lot of value to the fact that the information which is available as a footprint, or in terms of engagement information, score, and the signals, it can be further added to what I would call as a demographic profile, which is more like an offline, not offline, but something which relates to the customer. So for example, if you're selling to a business or if you're selling to a consumer, then a product may be more suitable for a certain age group or a certain income group, and or a certain specific group of consumer. and that adds to your demographic profile, and that sort of is not much of a score really, but more of a quality of a lead or the consumer, which can further drive the behavior or outreach to your customer. But fundamentally, when you are, there is a portion of customer base who's not converting online, and you want to sort of go after them in other modes of, selling. What would be the other factors you would consider important for a business? So I think fundamentally, in competitive business, there would be a factor which I call a speed of response, which is going to be very, very important in certain types of businesses, right? So especially in categories where if you are the first one to go after the customer when they inquire, then your chances of winning the business goes up. So I think that is one aspect which is important to consider in terms of how and when you would deploy a strategy of driving the conversion beyond the online. Second aspect would be if you are a very, very proactive service organization, then you are sort of monitoring, understanding what's going on your website or the help portal or whatever place where your consumers are coming back for information, seeking information, asking questions. And if you think that it is valuable to reach out to those customers based on the signals or drive some automated communication, which can lead to further telephony connect if necessary, then you can deploy the strategy. But what I found fundamentally is the reason when you would do that is primarily connected to the what I would call as the lifetime value of the customer and the cost of customer acquisition. So fundamentally, if you, let's say if you are in a business where acquiring a customer is, let's say you spend $10, and over the lifetime of the customer you would make $100 of them, right? Then deploying a strategy which is more costly in my appear, would be a right thing to do, assuming that the lifetime value of the customer is very high, right? So I think in your own respective business, that question has to be asked, saying, if I am selling a product which is $100, and that's all I'm going to make off the customer, then maybe you don't need to deploy an offline or rather a phone assist strategy to go after the customer, and web only would be a very, very sensible strategy. But assuming you have a product or multiple product categories which can drive higher lifetime value, and in that case you may consider a scenario where you can deploy you can take advantage of the signals you have and deploy an assist strategy, which could be driven by a phone conversation to the customer as an upsell or a cross-sell scenario, right? So I think the last element, which is cross-sell and upsell, connects to the second piece, where using the information you have about the customer, how can we drive more value of them, and if that is increasing the LTV beyond or multiple times of the cost of customer acquisition, then it is sensible to deploy the strategy. So what are the scenarios where I have observed this is working for the customer, right? So in context of education businesses, what I've found where we have a lot of customers, where a student usually buys over a period of time, and this is so when you look at a broader education as a market, right? I mean, there's obviously universities, colleges, career schools, which is a fast-moving category, or primarily vocational products like language learning and so on and so forth, or you have online programs, which is where a consumer would basically look at the online video tutorials, look at them, and then make a buying choice based on their comfort level. So some of this buying process may be staggered, maybe will be over weeks in some cases, right? So in that case, the student would register, compare, get the information available on your website, compare with other products, and basically trying to figure out where is the best fit for him or her. Now, assuming that in your case, if the product value is high enough, then maybe it makes sense to keep an eye on this customer, and assuming that we have enough information to sense that this customer is super excited about buying from us, then we should take the opportunity to reach out to them, connect with them either through automated mechanism, more contextual information, plus assisted by a phone call maybe to sort of drive the closure. And this has found a lot of value in the customer base we serve, where there has been tremendous value add in terms of uplift in sales using this particular strategy, because the value the customer in education derive out of one sale or multiple sale as a follow-on sale is so high that deploying this additional cost on reaching out to the customer to convince them to buy a product from you from a particular provider is valuable to the business overall. Same is the case with insurance, where we found that in some cases insurance product could be very competitive business, right? So in that case, if you're, let's say, gunning for the market share in a particular category, right, then in that case maybe the cost of customer acquisition may not be the most important criteria for you, but what would be most important is to gain a market share, or to sort of go after or be the first one to acquire the major market share. And I'm mostly sort of talking about a new entrant in the segment or category, or somebody who's come up with a new product altogether. Now, insurance products can be higher valued as well, where the LTV, the lifetime value of the customer, is very high. In that case, it may make sense to track the behavior of the consumer on the website, and the communication messages we are sort of sending out to them, and based on that we can choose which potential customer who's more primed to buy should we go ahead and pay our more attention to, and convince them to purchase from with us, right? So that again works. You don't have to call everyone. You just have to focus on the smaller set of prospects or the customer set which is more interested to buy from you, versus everybody out there who's trying to just maybe doing window shopping for that matter. That's another category. And the final category, I've sort of I've personally been on the buying side of this category, and especially when I use, say, travel. Travel obviously offers a very transactional experience. If you're booking an airline ticket or something which is very regular for consumers to make a purchase and just move forward. But then there are always purchase items in travel category which could be more experiential, or which are more package driven. That you're, let's say, taking a full vacation package for a family or for a small group, or maybe just for an individual, right? Now, in that case, the overall value of the transaction is relatively higher with respect to what a classic travel transaction looks like. And to be able to help the consumer make the right choice, it may be necessary sometimes to have a communication channel open with them, give them the comfort that they are making the right choice, or give them all the information to them so that they can make the right choice. Could be could determine that a sale will turn into your favor versus your competition. So I think in this category also we have seen a lot of value which comes to the customer when they deploy this particular strategy. So that's all I want to talk to you all today about, being a short pitch here. I would let Vipul and Rahul take over from here, and if there are questions out there, would love to address them now.
Great. That was really a great presentation, Rahul and Nilesh. Thanks a lot. I'm sure our audience must have loved it too. Sure. So let's start with our Q&A. And the first question that I have is something I had when I was actually listening to your presentation. And this question is particularly for you, Rahul. How do you recommend a business should create a survey question? What are those factors they need to keep in their mind before creating survey questions so that they get maximum response?
So thanks for this question, Vipul. So from my experience, what I've seen is that one mistake that people do is they ask a lot of questions. So what I would suggest is that ideally your survey should be small. One, it should be very objective. So when you have a sort of open-ended survey, usually people don't like to respond. And probably, you can time your surveys in a way that, instead of having a long survey, you should have small surveys run at different times, so that when a user comes to your website, there is high chances of them just answering one question rather than answering like 5 questions. And also, if you are asking just one question, the best practice would be to actually ask an objective question rather than an open-ended question. And we have seen that work with a lot of our customers, where they actually had asked just one question where it was very very objective, and once the user responds to that, then of course you can have a second question which can ask for more details. But any which ways, even if the user has answered to your first question, you get a lot of insights. So I would recommend that it should not be an open-ended question, and the number of questions should be as less as possible. I hope that
Yeah,
answers your question.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So our next question is from Rahul Shinde. So Rahul asking, he's particularly referring to the first slide that you had in the presentation, Rahul. So he's asking what industry were you referring to when you were showing that data?
All right. So that was for an e-commerce industry, and that research was done by eMarketer and another agency who actually did a lot of research and came up with that data.
Hope you got your answer, Rahul. Next question is from Silje. I'm sorry, Silje, if I pronounced your name wrong. So Silje is asking, how did you set up tracking on how long a user spent on each form field? She's referring to the slide that in which you had actually shown the time spent by each visitor on each form field, right?
All right. We used form analysis as a tool to track, all the sort of data points for each of the form fields. So there are many form analysis tools available in the market, including that in VW. So you can use any tool that would give you a field level analysis and the overall sort of conversion funnel for your form.
Hope that makes it clear for you, Silje. So yeah, another question for you, Rahul, is uh, in one of your slides, you actually showed an improvement on the sign-up form of VWO itself, wherein we reduce the number of form fields. So the question is, when you reduce a form size, you're basically reducing a lot of friction for the visitors. Doesn't it actually bring you a lot of junk leads? And how do you actually go about tackling it?
So that's actually a very, very good question. So that is true. So essentially, we one of the reasons why we increased our conversion rate was that we really reduced all the friction points for our prospects, and it became very easy for them to sign up for VW. And in the process, we did get a lot of junk leads as well. But the amount of leads that increased were so much that even the high quality leads were increased, right? And we used multiple methods to sort of qualify different leads. And in fact, I would really ask Nilesh to talk about how you can actually do a sort of lead scoring on the junk leads, or sort of different leads that you get, so that you're able to prioritize on good leads only. Nilesh, can you pitch in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the method we have deployed obviously has a combination. Fundamentally, we know in our own business what sectors are primed to buy our product, and so you focus on trying to get that information from the customer. And if it is not available because we are trying to increase the form fill rates, then we'll try to get that information in some or the other automated fashion, right, to increase the overall quality. And as a result of that communication, whatever wherever we have found that the lead is responding and the score goes up, then those leads are further prioritized from the outreach standpoint. So both the ability of a consumer to make a purchase in terms of consumer or the business, where we see a lot of sale coming in, A, and B, where the activity level is very high. I mean, these two are the key signals we have seen and has worked for us, and also for our customers. The third element is the repetition of it. So a lot of times when I go back to sales, I'm a salesperson at core, right? So A lot of times people make a purchase from an individual because they are very, very persistent, right? So in such situations in your business, sometimes you may feel that making 2 phone calls is good enough, and somebody's not responding, so I'll just leave it at that, right? It may not necessarily be true. In certain scenarios, maybe 5 phone calls is most appropriate, right? So how do you determine that? And that's where the automation and the whole ability to go after a certain category of prospects is, becomes very, very important. And hence, these signals can help us prioritize and drive the persistence behavior more in an automated fashion to drive the overall conversion up.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Another question is from Amit. So Amit is asking that if, let's say, a higher education institute has a website, so what should be the response strategy for a website for its returning visitors? Amit hasn't really mentioned who this question is for, but I believe Rahul and Nilesh, you both can answer this question from your perspectives.
Rahul, you want to take a shot at it first?
So, Vipul, can you just repeat the question once again?
Sure. So Amit is basically asking if a higher education institute has a website, what should be their strategy to engage with their website revisitors?
So I think from an optimization standpoint, it's really important to understand, if there are returning visitors, what was their activity, and how were they browsing on the website. It's really important to understand, which areas of the website were they most interested in. So for example, if you look at their past behavior and you realize that they are sort of interested in a particular course, or in a particular product that you're selling, I think you can really pop up a question for them, or probably personalize the content based on what their historical browsing history was. So in this case, I would really recommend that if you want to keep the returning visitors engaged, you should really personalize the content as per the browsing history. Nilesh,
So
do you want to add?
I'll add to that. So I think in the higher ed scenario, in my experience is the lifetime value of the customer. Usually the tickets are high, and if there is a repeat behavior of the revisit of a potential student, I think it would be sensible to look at the volume of that data, and the number of admissions rep we have on the side which is trying to attend to the students. So the ratio is favorable. Like we have more admissions reps, as a ratio per student. Then it would not be a bad idea to give this notification to the admissions rep saying, hey, John is on website and he has looked at these programs, and it'd be, why don't you just go and say hello to him and see what's could be interesting for like how to help him understand this program or that particular program, whatever he's trying to compare, right? And so there are two aspects to it. One is trying to communicate with John with respect to whatever information we have about from the website and past visiting history, all of that information, right? So that is the communication with John is one aspect of engagement with the student. The second aspect is using all this information, we inform the admissions counselor saying, hey, this is what I know about John, and this is maybe what you can use as a base information to contact and talk to John about, and help him sort out what is, where he, what programs will be more suitable for him. So I think the way I would look at a sale happening in this scenario is that you are basically pushing the customer or the consumer, John, to make a purchase with the higher ed institute. At the same time, you are pushing the admissions counselor to go after John and trying to close the loop. So I think both the things would be important, given and obviously there will be some differences in how your institute could be structured or how you actually close the admission. But this method would be optimal if your LTV is high.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense, Nilesh, and I think Amit, that should really answer your question, wherein you can use the data to really personalize your website. At the same time, you can use all the information you have and just talk to customers, and like Nilesh mentioned. So I think you complete the entire cycle, and this will ensure that you are you have the right content and you have the right sort of talking points for your prospect.
Sure. So Nilesh, there's one last question for you. Since lead scoring is a very interesting concept and very useful at that, many businesses find themselves entangled in these, myriads of profile attributes. So, are there any like three, four, the most important parameters that one should look at for the lead scoring efforts? And also, is there any sort of fixed formula out there which people can use to assess the quality of a lead?
So there is obviously, there is a variation for every business, but I think fundamentally what I found is that we need to, for certain businesses, we need to have a cutoff score. So you keep, the behavior. So you basically, obviously, the score goes up as the engagement is happening with the consumer or the visitor, and so you keep a check on that, right? And other points of interaction with the consumer. And at a certain point, you basically have a trigger saying, well, I think now this particular lead is primed to have a conversation or sort of move to the next stage, or qualified, or whatever, right? And there could be intermediate steps in that. So website visits obviously counts as one factor. Second is form fills, which obviously you have included, is an important, because form fills a very, very strong interest scenario. Third is a fundamental continued engagement, either people signing up for webinars, or they're continuously engaged on emails, etc. So that is the third method. And fourth is the amount of information they've shared with you already. So for example, if they've filled 3 fields, I mean, that is one set of information you have, but if they continue to share more information with you, that increases the overall quality of information you have about them. And progressively, if you can capture that information in your interaction with them, I think all of this, and a cutoff on how much and this is where it varies for the business, for every business. It could be a score of 20, 30, 40, 50, and again, it all varies in how you set it up for your business. But beyond a cutoff, you basically engage the customer, and sort of move forward with them at that point.
Right, right. Yep, that makes sense. So I think in the interest of time, we'll have to close this webinar. Great answers, Rahul and Nilesh. And yeah, and thank you so much, Rahul and Nilesh, for your time and effort that you've put into creating this wonderful presentation. And yeah, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Please fill the survey that will turn up once this webinar is closed. Your feedback will help us a lot. Oh, and by the way, we have another amazing webinar lined up on 8th of April. 8th of April, where we'll, with Yoga Dishal, where we'll share how to create an evidence-driven approach instead of an opinion-based approach. So yeah, you can follow the link shown here on the slide to register for the webinar. Have a good day, everyone.